When looking back on the history of Disney villains comes a variety of different figures of either serious or comical degrees. Whether it be from the realistic Frollos to the benevolent Maleficents, they all do come in different spices. But there is one that stands out on his own, being way more likable than all the Disney villains combined, oozing with the most personality that we have ever seen, where his name is indeed Hades. And Hades remains to be my third most favorite Disney villain after Scar and of course Frollo, and it's not hard to see why. Because if you were to ask a majority of the public who the funniest Disney villain ever was, the answer would of course be Hades. And that is an answer I do fully agree with, because there is just so much to his character that elevates him above the others in a perfect story like Hercules. And Hercules remains to be a top Disney masterpiece, not one of my personal favorites, but truly an amazing film where Hercules really encapsulated the hero's journey so well, unlike any other hero story I have ever seen. It's a story I just love for being the best inaccurate portrayal of the Greek mythology, done in a way that is really inspirational and takes its messages to heart about achieving what we set out to do in life. And that is all spiced up by Hades himself for what he brings to the role for our hero in being such a lovable, sleazy car salesman villain. A villain who rather uses his personality as his powers to get what he wants rather than the physical ones that so many others use as a means to an end. And James Woods' performance really does bring that flavor towards his character so well that I rate that performance as one of the best voice acting roles I've ever seen. I mean, his performance is the reason his character is presented the way that we see him in the film, because of what they originally planned for him in the beginning, more similar in vein to Ursula and Jafar, the two previous villains of the films Musker and Clements both directed. This is where they wanted him to be more serious and slow talking and portrayed by Jack Nicholson, but of course he left because he demanded way too much money for the film and Hades related merchandise, so they tried with others still going for that serious portrayal until James Woods himself actually stepped in to give a more casual approach to the character in his very audition, performing the role if he were that sleazy car salesman, which they loved, and allowed him to ad-lib some of his comedic performances in the film to become the one we all love to this day, where even to this day he comes back to the role and other related work that involves Hades, like in Kingdom Hearts, showcasing a real dedication to such a terrific performance and role. Everything that Hades does is done out of the wit of his own personality to achieve his own goals. Most of the time we see his actual powers is only when he uses to whip up some deals or burst into the constant short temper, turning him into a bright red flaming hot ball of rage. Other than that, he just uses his charm to get what he wants. His motivations are that of a regular villain wanting to take over Olympus, being the home of the gods, being discontent with ruling the underworld, where it is drab and gloomy compared to the heavenly home of the gods. The difference here in this beginning is that unlike your typical take over the world villain that you associate with the pure evil attitude, Hades just goes all about it casually business type fashion, the delivery of a comedic con artist that you almost never take seriously because of how funny he is. The great thing about all of this is how whenever he actually appears for the most part, you just cannot find the urge to hate him in any way. His personality always seems to get him to like you despite knowing his intentions that goes against our main characters wanting to rule something that isn't his. And even though he's presented with this con artist type attitude who does schmooze and manipulate people to get his way, he is actually a very honest god who keeps his promises and deals no matter the cost and shows some sympathy for those he works with, especially Meg, considering her own ex-boyfriend left her for another woman, where at the very least he does show that he has morals that are somewhat righteous. But of course that doesn't excuse him for what he wants to do, and of course his frightening temper to do what is out of order of what exists in that very world, where we establish at first that he isn't liked amongst the other gods except his own brother Zeus coming to greet the young Hercules.
So is this an audience or a mosaic?
By the way he's introduced, we already infer he's the villain, being quite different than the rest, and of course bitter to the fact that he works in the underworld that was bestowed upon him by Zeus himself, feeling humiliated by his own jokes towards him, which sets up the plot for him to take over Olympus. This sets him up with the fates to show him that 18 years after this point, when the planets align, he will be able to free the Titans and lead him to victory to rule over Olympus, unless Hercules fights him, which he will actually fail at in the end. This sets up his plan to try to make Hercules mortal by drinking this potion, where we find out his minions are just too terrible to get the job done, that Hercules actually still retains his strength despite being mortal, where they return lying to him that they actually did this, which encourages him to plan along, where of course over time he meets Meg, who sold her soul for her boyfriend who left him and now works under Hades to help with his plans to free the Titans and rule over Olympus eventually. One of the funnier things about his character is that everything that Hades does actually ironically contributes to his own defeat when Hercules comes back into the spotlight. The reason for his own journey to become a hero happens because he tried to turn immortal and everything done so he could try to rule Olympus. Because this is where he finds out that Hercules is alive when Meg failed to recruit Nessus because Hercules actually defeated him, where he realized and got pissed at Pain and Panic for actually lying. One of many great scenes where he comedically gets angry at his own minions for failing him, where honestly you have to actually say that he comes across as a pretty decent boss considering he hasn't killed them yet. I mean, yes, he may torture them from time to time with his angry fire that is frightening to see, but he constantly tasks Pain and Panic to still help him out in the end, meaning he is very forgivable despite their many failures. The other great thing about this is how Meg is just so unenthused about all of this being a prisoner and whatnot, using sarcastic quips around his character that shows how he really isn't inherently evil or scary to other people he hangs around for a long time despite being a villain. I mean, he is scary to his own minions mostly, but for the most part around mortal humans like Meg who get to know and spend time with him, they really just tolerate him now because of how charming he is. Where now he has to force Hercules to face the Hydra, which he also manages to defeat. And this scene is perfect for his character because of how smug he was with his cigarette in the beginning and his manipulations of that very scene, where the next time you see him after Herc defeats the Hydra, you see him get angry, burning that cigarette up and grabbing Pain and Panic. That shows us his constant failures that actually result in his own very actions, where the next scene after witnessing the heroics of Hercules shows him pissed off at his failures to constantly stop him and seeing his own minions now wearing his own merchandise, making him angry, blowing up a mountain. An iconic scene nonetheless, where Hades shows the perfect balance of being a terrifying villain and a comedic one at the same time that sets him apart from other villains for what he does, because every success he tries to make actually comes with their own failures that he causes himself, where he finally gets the idea for Meg to seduce Hercules after hearing about throwing curves at him.
I wonder if maybe I haven't been throwing the right curves at him.
This scene is also great now knowing what he was actually inferring to 20 years later after watching the film for the first time as a baby, knowing how much Hercules actually loves Meg and using that to his advantage so he can get to him to give up his strength for her and give her freedom finally. A deal that we know would come true because he's always so true to his word and what he did for her in the past to save others, which she originally cared about. Of course, this backfires again because she falls in love with him, now knowing of no such weaknesses for Hercules, which actually makes Hades realize that his weakness is actually her, and he's going to use her to get to him to give up his strength to win. Because this is where he finally meets up with him again for the first time, trying to make a deal with him to give up the heroics for a day, presenting Meg being held captive. What I like about this scene is how it's presented as that typical situation where the villain has the upper hand over the hero holding something captive that they actually love about, which turns the story in the favor of the villain and makes us feel everything is hopeless for the moment of the hero, something we actually see in Hercules' own attitude, being angry and desperate at what he's actually done. But instead of hating Hades in this situation, you still cannot help but feel charmed by him throughout his con man attitude persona he's portraying, pitching a deal that would be beneficial to what we want in the moment for both sides. I mean, we don't want him to win, but his schmoozing definitely wins us over for him in the end, only using his godlike abilities to hold Meg hostage while using his smooth talk to actually win in the overall situation. You really can't hate him for how he is, even though what he's doing will ruin our hero in the long run because of his own actions. And of course, knowing his love he has for Meg, he actually agrees while revealing that she was actually working under him, finally losing his power and allowing him to unleash the Titans on Olympus while sending Cyclops to finally kill him off to seal the deal. This allows him to present himself back to Olympus, where he reveals to his own brother that this was his plan all along so that he could rule, everything working out for him great as prophesied. That is, until Hercules got a renewed hope by Phil, not quitting on him for the betterment of others to go the distance, where he finally gets the mental strength he needed to defeat Cyclops, where at the same time, Meg tries to move Hercules from being crushed by a pillar, which of course sadly injures her and actually breaks Hades' promise and allows his strength to come back, where he travels back to Olympus to free the gods and finally defeat the Titans, surprising and stopping Hades' invasion, much to his anger that got him caught in their crossfires. But even though his plan backfired, he knows at the very least that he has the consolation consolation prize that is Meg's own death, where Herc cared so much for her because of the fact she saved him. And her death actually encourages him to face Hades, which he actually wants him to do so that he could dive into the underworld and try to save Meg's soul. A deal he offers to take Meg's place in the underworld, which is very attractive to Hades because he knows anyone who goes down there would be dead before he reaches his goal. In this moment, he actually knows he's lost. He doesn't have the Titans anymore to help him to achieve that, but what he has here is the satisfaction and consolation prize of capturing Hercules for all of eternity in the underworld because he's not a god anymore, and that is something that would break the heart of the lovable Zeus. And knowing Hercules' own journey in this very story is actually where it works to his very advantage, because this is the moment where he actually finally becomes a hero, doing things for others rather than the fame and glory he has come to know throughout the course of the film. The moment he is supposed to become a god and saves her soul at the same time, which of course stuns Hades, infuriated and scared at this revelation, knowing that there is nothing he can do to stop him, trying to schmooze his way one last time to try and stop him and make a deal. The only thing he has left where everything else has all ultimately failed, because of the fact that Hercules is a god and there's nothing he can do to stop that. And because of that, he gets punched down by Hercules down into the underworld, dragged down by the other spirits he watched over, flushing down like he was in a toilet, likely trapped down there for a very long time. Not dead because he is a god, but just stuck down with the mortal souls he oversaw for his entire life. In the end, Hades is a perfect villain because of how he contributes to the hero's journey in the story that is Hercules, while presenting himself as a sleazy car salesman that you just find too hard to hate. I mean, still evil in the regular sense of being the story's main villain who just wants to rule, but done in this way that actually makes you like him as a villain. A villain that doesn't use his powers to make him a powerful threat, but uses his persuasive deals to take advantage of the situation most of the time, and doing this in this funny, comedic, relatable way. He is the true perfect balance for the tone of the movie and the style of the animation that made Hercules into a very true masterpiece. And that's all I really have to say for him. A perfect villain that is the most liked in all of Disney history, and that is something that will really remain for all of time. And that's all I have to say. I'm all done, so goodbye.